Good morning. We're trying something new. We're streaming this to audiences outside of Collegeville, so we should probably try to do this approximately on time. Is it really standing room only? Wow. That won't be true next year. Well, welcome. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming out this morning to talk about St. John's and the future of this great institution. My name is Michael Hemesath, and I'm president of St. John's. I guess that's not a big surprise, but for our audience, in case someone happened to click on this link inadvertently, wonder what they're seeing, you can click back to YouTube now. So almost exactly a year ago, I was immensely fortunate to be offered the chance to return to St. John's as president. I was deeply honored to have an opportunity that I had not even dreamed possible. And over the past year, the pleasures of returning to this exceptional community have exceeded even my own very high expectations. One of the obvious questions that came up during the search process, and has come up often subsequently, is what is my vision for St. John's University? In a world of higher education that often feels like it's undergoing fundamental change and sometimes feels like it's under siege, it's obviously important to have a clear vision for the future and a plan for how to achieve that vision. But it's equally important to be sober and thoughtful as we craft that vision and not be swayed by the passions of the moment. Of course, we need to anticipate the future and understand what the next generation of students will want and need. But we must start with our values, remember our history, and understand our strengths. When I applied for this job, an important attraction was what I had experienced here as a student myself. St. John's showed me what I was capable of and opened up opportunities that I had never known possible. St. John's was a transformative experience for me. This was the vision of undergraduate education that I had both experienced here and that I brought with me when I returned. But of course, any vision requires the work and support of the whole community. So one of my first jobs was to see how my vision aligned with that of the rest of the community. Toward this end, I've had the opportunity to talk with many of you on campus, both faculty and staff. I've had the chance to review our strategic plan and our campaign documents, and I've talked to many parents and students. And I've also had the pleasure of traveling around the world and around the country to meet many of our alumni. What I discovered is a powerful consistency in the understanding of the mission of St. John's. The community here and beyond Collegeville believes that the undergraduate experience at St. John's is about transforming the lives of our students to help them lead lives filled with success and meaning, however they define those terms. And that this transformative outcome is based on four essential characteristics. We're a residential institution, we focus on the liberal arts, we are Catholic, and we are Benedictine. My experiences over the past 9 months have provided powerful evidence of the importance of each of these characteristics in that transformative education, both for our alumni and, I would argue, for our future students. Let me turn briefly to each of these parts of the St. John's experience. First is our residential community. Among the most active conversations in higher education is what role technology in general and online education in particular will play in the future. But these conversations all too often ignore the education that takes place by bringing students together into a residential community. Place matters, as a review of some of the recent successes of our students reveals. Among the many extracurricular successes our students have had this year are a case study team from St. John's and St. Ben's placed third in a national competition in Washington, D.C. recently. The Fighting Saints, the ROTC group at St. John's, their co-ed marathon teams took first and second place in a recent Army marathon in New Mexico. The Record won several awards for student newspapers earlier this year. And the St. John's hockey team won the conference and advanced to the NCAA tournament. I could go on, but the point is that the learning that was part of each of these experiences took place because we brought students together into a residential community. And as impressive as these achievements are, the most powerful evidence of the role of residential education came as a result of John Gallardi's retirement, which prompted many conversations with alumni about their experiences with John. To a man, what alumni talked about was not their exceptional successes on the field, but about what playing for John taught them about life and about the deep friendships formed on John's teams. Collectively, these experiences provide a powerful evidence of a residential community that is at the core of the transformative educational experience that we provide. The second important characteristic of the St. John's experience is that of the liberal arts. Another important conversational thread that's taking place in higher education these days, especially in the midst of an economic slowdown, concerns the future of the liberal arts. Many educators and policymakers are suggesting that students need vocationally focused educational programs to train them for specific jobs. And by implication, that a broad-based liberal arts education does not serve students well. Again, my experiences over the past 9 months argue strongly against this notion. This fall, the College of St. Benedict and St. John's were honored with the Senator Paul Simon Award for Comprehensive Globalization, which recognizes the importance of helping students explore the wider world that they will be living and working in. While off-campus studies does not focus on specific skills, many of our alumni and students have talked movingly about their experiences abroad that have changed the direction of their professional lives and, more importantly, changed how they viewed the world. Second experience I had, a Florida alum told about working on a governor's commission on higher education that was overly obsessed with the focus on vocational training for students. Yet as he recounted his professional experience, he said that at his engineering and construction firm, the 4 top positions were all held by liberal arts graduates. Another alum, a professor at MIT, described how his liberal arts education at St. John's taught him how to move across disciplines, how to adapt to changes in his profession, and how to straddle the fields of engineering, media, and literature. And finally, in the biggest news story with the St. John's connection this year, the appointment of Dennis McDonough as President Obama's chief of staff garnered over 800 media stories, topping John Gallardi's mere 600 stories. Dennis was a history and Spanish major, double major, at St. John's. Not exactly vocational degrees, yet his liberal arts experience has helped prepare him for success at the highest levels of government. So the irony of the critiques of the liberal arts are that the very changes in the world that might suggest or argue for more specialized training, new technologies, previously unknown industries, competition from abroad, all of those things actually remind us that the ability to adapt to an unpredictable future and to learn new things are among the most important skills we can impart to our students. And these are exactly what a great liberal arts education does. The third pillar of our experience at St. John's is that of our Catholic identity. Now, at first glance, The political issues in Minnesota this fall might suggest that this has been a challenging time to be a Catholic institution. But I think that there were important ways in which the experiences this fall helped strengthen our identity. I was immensely proud of how we as a community handled the hard and often emotional marriage amendment conversation. We did very well the three things that I think are incumbent upon us as a Catholic educational institution. First, we faithfully and respectfully presented Catholic teaching on this issue. Second, we allowed members of the community the freedom to express their views. And third, and possibly most important, we used the opportunity to educate our students with the goal of developing, in the words of Thomas Aquinas, a well-formed conscience, capable of examining and responding to the many moral challenges that life will present them. I know that our position did not make every one of our alumni and friends happy, but the fact that we made individuals on both sides of this particular debate unhappy was a nice reminder of the healthy diversity in our community. This diversity reflects the broader world and is not seen in all colleges around the country, where orthodoxy can be enforced both from the right and from the left. The way in which we lived out our Catholic identity during this conversation is one in which the whole community of St. John's can be proud. And finally, the last pillar of our transformative St. John's experience is the Benedictine tradition that formed us historically and informs our experiences each day. There are multiple facets of that tradition, but the two that I want to focus on briefly today are community and hospitality. Again, the conversations with staff, students, faculty, and alumni speak to the importance of this Benedictine tradition in the transformative education that we provide. I had the chance to meet with faculty and staff throughout the year, and a number of you spoke of knowing very little about monks or about Benedictinness before you arrived on campus. Some of you described coming to St. John's thinking you might be here for 2 or 3 years before you moved on to a different job, and now you're here 25 years or more, having found this community to be a very welcoming place to live out your professional lives. Secondly, I had the opportunity to meet with alumni around the world, specifically in Hong Kong and the Bahamas, who spoke movingly of how monks like Father Tom Toll transformed their lives and futures by bringing them to this community and welcoming them in. I had dinner with students from South Central Los Angeles and from Newark, New Jersey, who described their experiences at St. John's in glowing terms because of the welcome that all of you provided them to a place that probably was not so familiar to them if they grew up in South Central or Newark. And finally, at a recent event in Boston, I met an alum of Turkish descent who grew up in Pakistan, who came to St. John's probably 15 years ago, and after describing his experience in great detail, summarized it by saying he thought of himself as the first Benedictine Muslim. Again, an immense tribute to this community. So we've been welcoming people to this community for over 150 years, from Little Falls and from Okinawa, from Ripon and from Nassau. And it's this hospitality that makes everything else we aspire to do possible. So, we are residential. We focus on the liberal arts, we're Catholic, and we're Benedictine. That's defined us in our past, it defines us in the present, and it will define us in the future as we go forward. So we'll obviously talk more about how we live out this mission in the months and years to come. But let me just make note of several important commitments that we have made to this vision already. We've recently authorized a capital campaign, of which you will hear more about in the months and years to come, in which the priorities that we have in that campaign are linked directly to the vision that I just described. Among the things that we're committed to doing, we've made significant commitments to student development, particularly with upgrading our athletic facilities. Because of the residential nature of the institution that we believe will be essential going forward, we need to have world-class athletic facilities for our varsity athletes and our intramural athletes. And that's one of our campaign priorities. Secondly, we're committed to the Learning Commons project to take advantage of the new pedagogies that exist in education and to take full advantage of the small liberal arts experience that our students have on campus with small classes and interacting personally with faculty members. That's a second important goal for our campaign. Third, we're going to focus on continuing to provide access to students as we have for many, many decades. The third important leg of our capital campaign is focusing on educational access for students who don't have the means to come to a place like St. John's without support in the form of scholarships. So that's a third important goal for our campaign. And then finally, there are some issues that we've done separate from the campaign that further strengthen this vision that we have for this institution. When we restructured the legal relationship between the Abbey and the university, the wise drafters of that agreement included something called a sustaining agreement. It's separate from the legal documents, but it commits both the Abbey and the university to a number of important things to keep us closely tied to each other in the future. Included in that are an Abbey Relations Committee, which will explicitly work to strengthen ties between the university and the Abbey. We've also made a number of important decisions in recent years, such as a 4-year residency requirement for students, establishing the Benedictine Institute, helping find funding for monks to explore roles within the university, and having a Benedictine preference policy in hiring. All of these things will assure the Benedictine nature of this community stays strong going forward. So as we look to the future, the mission of St. John's that has sustained us for 150 years continues to be our vision going forward. We are a residential, liberal arts, Catholic, Benedictine institution whose mission is to transform the lives of young men and, with our partner, the College of St. Benedict, young women. This does not, however, mean that we're going to rest on our laurels. We certainly have real challenges ahead, and I'm happy to talk about some of those during the question session if you'd like to. The world around us changes constantly, and we need to adapt to that. But to have a clear vision of our future and our mission is a tremendous strength. We have creatively adapted throughout our long history, even as we have maintained a consistent vision, and we will continue to do so in the future. So as I look back over the past year, the single most powerful experience has been to be reminded of the consistency of our vision across students, staff, faculty, parents, and alumni. I look forward to continuing to fulfill this mission for the 21st century with all of you and the many others in the St. John's community. Thank you very much. So I'd be more than happy now. Can you hear me with the microphone still? Is that all right? So I'd be more than happy to take questions about anything you have, hear comments, critiques. One thing I would like to note, when I was here a year ago at this time, the welcomingness of the community was powerfully realized to me when I was made aware to me when I realized later that I interviewed for this job. At least on one of the days, I was wearing a purple tie. And you were so generous to forgive that terrible faux pas. I'm deeply grateful, and I have added a number of red ties to my collection going forward. So, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about this morning? Please, we have a microphone here that will allow everyone to hear the question.
Morning, Dr. Hemesath. I know we've got a great sustainability effort going on campus, and I've recently heard in passing that we might be doing something less with coal in the future. Could you comment on that?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. Of course, one of the things that is part of our Benedictine tradition and goes back a long, long time is the sustainability of the beauty of this environment. This place matters to us, and we need to preserve that for the future going forward. And it's not just here. We want to make commitments that are consistent with sustainability more broadly. And one of the things that we have done recently, and again, this is absolutely with the help of the Abbey, because you probably don't need to hear all the gory details, but the way in which we purchase power now, we actually purchase the power from the Abbey, though decisions about that, the power plant and that sort of thing going forward will be made in conjunction with the university. So in any case, the Abbey recently committed to no longer burning coal as a power source at St. John's. We've been using natural gas for quite a while, but we recently decommissioned the burners that are capable of burning coal, and the infrastructure for delivering coal to campus is being mothballed because we have no expectation of going back to coal going forward. So that piece is absolutely an important part of our sustainability efforts going forward, and we've done a handful of other things like replacing certain kinds of light bulbs that have generated real savings on campus. We have the new greenhouse down in Flinttown, which is another piece of the sustainability project. So that is going to be an important part of our vision going forward as well. But coal will not be part of that future. So thank you for that question. There have to be a couple other things you're wondering about.
Michael, in terms of challenges for the university, what do you see as short and long-term challenges for St. John's, and how can we as employees help St. John's remain vibrant and strong and get through these challenging times you're talking about?
That's a great question. Thank you. That almost would have been a planted question, but it wasn't. I see three fundamental challenges, two of which are St. John's specific and one of which is more national. The first challenge we face is demographic. We are living in the upper Midwest, as is painfully obvious as we look out the window. But more importantly than the meteorological challenges or the demographic challenges, Minnesota higher education, or Minnesota high school graduates have leveled out, and we are not likely to see an uptick in that in the near future. That's true in the upper Midwest in general. And so what we absolutely need to do to fill our classrooms and our beds in the years to come are to make sure that we reach out beyond the upper Midwest to attract more students to St. John's. And this is true for St. Ben's as well, right? The demographics are not much better for women, but I'll touch on that one in just a second. So we as an institution, and the admissions office has already been thinking about this and working hard on this, and we're going to have alumni representatives actually in Chicago on a full-time basis next year and in Los Angeles on a full-time basis so that we broaden the reach for St. John's and St. Ben's. A lot of that has to be done off campus with the help of our alumni and with the help of the admissions office. But what you all can do is exactly what you have done. I mean, you've welcomed students from Newark, you've welcomed students from South Central, and they've come here and they've had exceptional experiences. The Newark example is particularly powerful. We've had 21 students come from St. Benedict's Prep in Newark over the last 4 or 5 years. And of those 21 students, every single one of those students has either graduated or is still in school at St. John's. And we don't do that well with kids from Egan. We don't do that well with kids from St. Cloud. I mean, we have an exceptional retention rate, but it's not 100%. Now, of course, eventually there will be someone from Newark that decides they can't complete their degree here. But so far, that's an exceptional example of the welcoming community that we have on this campus. So the demographic piece is what we're going to work on. What you all need to do is continue to be the warm and welcoming place that you have been for in recent years and throughout our history. The other thing you could do, I suppose, is if you happen to know students from other parts of the country, if you have nieces, nephews, people that are living in other parts of the country that might want to take a look at St. John's, that would be great. We'd love to have them come visit St. John's and St. Ben's and see whether this might be a potential fit for them. So that's mostly our job, but there are small ways in which you can help. The second challenge we face has to do specifically with young men. I talked about this a little bit during the interview process, and I've learned more about the issues and challenges this year. As you probably know, the undergraduate population in this country is approximately 60% women and 40% men. Now, that's a huge problem nationally. Where are those other high school boys going when they don't choose to go to college? But one of the additional challenges that we see on campus specifically is that the young men don't seem to take as full advantage. There are exceptions, of course. I don't mean to generalize for every single student, but if you look across the student bodies, young men seem to take a little bit less full advantage of their opportunities at St. John's than the young women do when they come to the College of St. Benedict. Now, the young men land on their feet. They end up doing just fine in most cases, but what I would love for us to be able to figure out how to do, and Father Doug and his staff have been thinking hard about this, a lot longer than I have, is how to help those young men, when they come to campus, take full advantage of their potential, academically, emotionally, socially, all of those things. I mean, maybe the social things they're maybe a little too good at already, but I mean, it's a serious concern, and it's not just at St. John's, of course. Young men have this challenge at all institutions across the country. Many institutions are unbalanced in a lot more women than men, and that's not ideal for them as well. But I think one of the interesting things that St. John's potentially has the ability to offer is some insights that might be beneficial to other institutions around the country. If we can figure out how to get young men to more fully engage once they come to campus, that would be a great thing. There are no silver bullets. This is a hard challenge. People have been thinking about this for a long time, but I think we need to remember that even as we have a very powerful transformative experience for many of our students, there's still a handful of our students that we need to reach and to get them to take fuller advantage of that opportunity when they're here. So, demographics, engagement of young men. The third challenge is a challenge that all of higher education faces, and that's the economic challenge of the higher education model, especially the private liberal arts higher education model. We're expensive. The same 20 students that are in a classroom with one faculty member today is the same experience that we gave students 10, 15, 20, 50 years ago. But that's an expensive model. We have highly educated, expensive labor in the classroom with the same group of students. There are not great ways to find productivity increases in higher education if we want to maintain the same vision of a small residential liberal arts experience. And I don't think we want to change that, but I think what we do need to do is figure out how to get as many economies as we can out of our current operation, how to run ourselves a little bit more efficiently. I think we're a well-run place. Our budgets are tight. We're very careful with the money that we get from our students in tuition and the gifts we get from alumni. But anything we can do to try to keep costs down is an important part of that educational mission going forward, because it seems very clear that the external market is putting pressure on tuition, saying that tuition increases cannot be as aggressive as they have been in recent years. And we're committed to trying to make education affordable. We had the lowest comprehensive fee increase in 25 years at St. John's and St. Ben's this year, so we're trying to keep those costs down. But as we keep those costs down, the costs we have on campus to pay the fabulous faculty and staff that we have are not shrinking, and we need to find ways to help support that mission. And so, we're going to work hard talking to alums and help them understand the complications of this educational model and the economics of this educational model, and we will try to get more support from our alumni. We have a great alumni base that are very loyal to the institution in terms of their emotional connection to this place because of the things that many of you have done for them. We don't do quite as well in engaging them with the financial piece as I'd like us to. As you may or may not know, annual fund participation at St. John's is about, it bumps around between 25 and 30%. This year it's in the low, it's just above 25% in terms of participation. We can do better than that, and we need to go out and convince alumni that they need to step up and support us because of what we do. The best places in the country are approaching 60% alumni participation. So we can do better, and it's an important part of my job to go out and make that case to alumni. All of you that are watching online, I'm coming for you. So, but having said that, I want to not be too pessimistic here. I mean, I think we've got a great model. The evidence about the benefits of higher education are irrefutable. If you're a smart high school student that's ambitious and wants to have a solid middle class life or more, you've got to get an education. There's no question about that. So it's not a question of whether higher education will continue to be something that students pursue. The question will be what models will they choose to pursue, what schools, what kinds of educational models will they choose to pursue. But as I've tried to make the case, I think that the residential liberal arts model is among the best, no, not among. The residential liberal arts model is the best undergraduate education you can get. And I think we at St. John's and St. Ben's provide among the best of that best model. And we'll continue to do that going forward with your help. So those are the three challenges that I think are the main things we need to focus on. There are other things that we obviously have to be aware of in the world outside of St. John's, but I think that the demographics, the engagement of young men, and the economic model are the three things that they don't keep me up at night, because I think we're in a great place, but I worry about them during the day, think about them during the day. So thanks for that question, Tom. Jean, can you?
With respect to the economic challenge in higher education, you spoke a little bit about pedagogies, do you see any opportunities for working on cost reductions and integrating more distance learning into the classroom? So some kind of a hybrid that doesn't disrupt the small liberal arts model, but it integrates some of this other kind of pedagogies.
Right. Well, that's a great question. Everyone get the question about how the new technology and online options might be used at St. John's, maybe for economic benefits, but most importantly, I think for educational benefits. I think that the online, so let me step back first. I think the online question comes up a lot. You know, some people are saying residential schools are going to disappear because the online models just are so much less expensive. It's impossible for us to compete. You know, I just don't believe that's true. I mean, I guess it's obvious, or I wouldn't have taken the job, I suppose, unless I thought it was going to blow up after I left. But, you know, I do not believe that that's true. The online model will provide some exceptional opportunities for students that don't have access to this kind of education. Especially kids in the developing world, the online model provides incredible opportunities that they didn't have, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. But for residential liberal arts institutions, I think the issue is to figure out how to use these technologies to enhance what we do on campus in our classrooms. And, you know, that may be watching a lecture online in the same way you might read a textbook, and then coming to class, and rather than going over the material that was presented in the lecture, you get a chance to talk about it and to have discussions that are more in-depth and approach the subject, you know, from a different, a different kind of seminar style or discussion style pedagogy rather than just the sort of traditional stand and deliver lecture. So I think there are ways in which we need to think about how technology can enhance what we do here. As a practical matter, I mean, so that there are great ways in which it can enhance the pedagogies and the experience of our students. And in some ways, it allows us to take fuller advantage of our comparative advantage, which is that we're small and we have a chance to have faculty interact with students in small settings. Now, the University of Minnesota can use online lectures, but at the end of the day, in a 300 or 500 person economics class, you're still not going to have the kind of intimacy that you have in a small residential setting like we offer at St. John's and St. Ben's. So there may be ways in which online technology can further strengthen the advantage we have in terms of pedagogies. But the initial question you asked was about the economics of this. And it's not obvious to me how this will have a significant change in our cost structure unless we are prepared to change what we do with our students and have classes that are, we have some online classes that are done in the summer now, but it seems to me that if we move away from 20 students in a classroom with a faculty member, that fundamentally changes the nature of what we provide. And so I don't look to the new technologies and the online opportunities as ways of lowering our costs. I think we should always keep that in mind, but I think that what we should be thinking about is how those can enhance the experiences of our students and make our classroom and residential experience more powerful. I don't know that there's a lot of savings there for institutions like us unless we change the fundamental nature of what we provide. Now, I'd love to be proven wrong, but I've thought a bit about that with other people as well, and it's not obvious exactly where the cost savings would come from. But it is more obvious, I think, where the pedagogical benefits can come from. So To be determined. I mean, that conversation will be continued, and we will be calling upon you all to help us think about that as well going forward. Okay. Dan?
Thank you for your opening statement. I have a long-term question. If you think ahead 10 years from now, let's say, do you think, okay, that'll work. If you think ahead 10 years, what are the 2 or 3 most important things for you in how St. John's will be a stronger institution at that time? And what do we have to do in the meantime to make those 3 things happen?
So, first, 10 years from now, I would like our student body to look different than it does right now. I want our student body to be, and we need, it's not just I think we need our student body to be more national and more international. I mean, we've done a tremendous job with international students already, as I noted in my earlier remarks. You know, St. John's and the forward-thinking monks at St. John's were doing globalization long before it became trendy. So I think we're in a good position to broaden our reach, but we need more students from outside the upper Midwest, and I think we need more international students. We've got about 6% of our student body is now international. I think we might think about a target of something more like 10% going forward. So, different student body. Secondly, I think we need to do what Gene suggested, which is we need to figure out how to make the technologies that are currently, some people think disrupting higher education. I think, maybe just roiling higher education a little bit. And we need to figure out how to use those to our advantage to strengthen what we do on campus, to make our residential liberal arts experience even better, and to make the inevitable cost increases more palatable to parents and to students by saying what you're getting in this experience is as great an education as you can possibly get. So pedagogies need to adapt over the next decade to take advantage of some of these things without losing the benefits of that small, interactive, one-on-one relationship that you and your colleagues have with students. And then the third thing that we need to do, I think, a decade from now, is to build on the relationships that we have with our alumni and the great experience we provide them to make us more financially secure going forward. We are very much a tuition-driven institution right now. If we don't make our class every year, as we didn't this year, we fell short by about 25 students, and that meant in September we had to make some adjustments to the budget. We didn't have to go for the nuclear option of saying salary increases are not going to be continued, are not going to be put in place, but we did have to adjust the budget because of our tuition dependency. And so what I would love to see a decade from now, our alums to have stepped up, our alums and friends to have done 2 things to help make us a little bit more resilient to the kinds of vagaries of the admissions cycle. One is to have increased alumni participation on an annual basis with the annual fund. I think 60% might be overly ambitious for a goal for annual fund participation because that's the very best in the business, but given the loyalty of our alums, I'd love to see us get into the mid-40s, maybe. But the second piece of that is that we do not have the endowment that we need to provide insurance against the ups and downs in the economy and the ups and downs in higher education. Our endowment is about $150 million, and I would note that it's probably because of my fine stewardship, it's at the highest point it's ever been in history. So I know some of you might talk about correlation and causality, but let's ignore that piece. But that $150 million is a little bit deceptive. Some of that is the School of Theology's endowment. Some of that is Hill Museum and Manuscripts Library's endowment. And then what's left of that is College of Arts and Sciences. Some of that is also committed to bond repayment for money that we borrowed. So the fact of the matter is we have an endowment for the College of Arts and Sciences. It's probably about $100 million, sort of ballpark, which we have access to use on a regular basis. That's just too small going forward, and we need to find ways to grow that endowment. And an endowment, I know talking to alums, they don't find endowment to be very sexy. Not enough of them are economists, because economists find endowments to be very sexy. But we need to make the case to alums that we've had an endowment historically in the form of the monastic community, which provided huge benefits to this institution over its history up until the last probably 20 years or so. And we need to replace that monastic endowment with a financial endowment. And that's a piece of the three things that I'd like to see different. Demographics being different for our students, integrating pedagogies and technology to make us fully capable of taking advantage of all these new technologies, and then finally getting the financial piece in a little bit more solid shape than it is. And all those things are manageable. These are not insurmountable challenges, but they are clear challenges. Thanks, Dan.
Mr. President, I've got a question about broadening our graduate programs. One thing that kills me every month is when I have to send a check to another university for higher education, which is basically full pay. Have we looked at and explored that option? Because I am a firm believer of the on-site, living on campus, undergraduate. But as we start focusing on our, as I pulled John Young's brain here, 23,000 graduates from St. John's and maybe 17 or so from St. Ben's, in relationship to all my friends that didn't choose St. John's originally but would love to have a graduate degree, is there any exploration of that?
That's a great question that's come up in a number of different contexts. I mean, first I would note that, of course, we do graduate education, right? We have a school of theology, so I don't want to, the focus here has been a little bit on the undergraduate experience, but of course, the School of Theology is an absolutely essential part of what we do, and it's an essential part of our mission to the broader Catholic community. So I understand you weren't specifically asking about a theology degree, because we know we can get you one of those already. But I assume you're thinking about things like, an MBA program. Lots of places are doing that. There are a variety of other sorts of master's programs that places like St. John's have added. Just to be very clear about, very direct, I don't think that is our comparative advantage. I think we should always look for additional revenue sources, but I think that the danger of broadening our mission to include graduate education separate from the School of Theology is that it potentially dilutes the undergraduate experience. There are, there are a handful of exceptions in the state of Minnesota, but a number of the small private liberal arts colleges in the state of Minnesota, as you know, have gone the route that you suggested by adding MBA programs, leadership programs, various kinds of professional credentialing at the master's level. Without naming any names, and I don't know enough about the specific quality of these institutions to say this with complete certainty, but as I see schools do that, it makes me think, they must be in a little bit of trouble. They seem to be grasping for other things to do. Maybe that means their undergraduate mission isn't working as well as they'd like it to. Now, that may or may not be true, but I worry that if I view that as, if that's my perception, I worry that it could potentially dilute the brand at St. John's, and St. Ben's, of course. They would be part of this if we went forward in this kind of model. I think what we do is undergraduate liberal arts education. I think we do it well. I think we have economic challenges that we need to address, but I don't think that graduate education is a revenue source that we will be exploring in the short run, because I think that the potential damage that it would do to the undergraduate experience, I think is too great. So that's where I am on that one. And I know that not everyone agrees with that, but in the short run, I think that would be my answer. I guess, there's another aside here. One of the things that's changed from when I was a student, and certainly changed from 40 or 50 years ago, I guess I was a student almost 40 years ago, so 60 or 70 years ago. Graduate education, I think you raise an important point. The graduate education for our students has become very important. Something like 60%, 2/3 of our undergraduates are going on to get some kind of graduate degree within 5 years of graduating from St. John's and St. Ben's. That number has been going up steadily over time, and I have every reason to think that number is likely to continue. And that's a real tribute to what we provide our students. We get our students into some of the best programs in the country. They do very well when they go on to graduate programs. And so, I would say to our alums, I appreciate the fact that you would love to have a graduate degree from St. John's or St. Ben's, but what I would say to you is take your St. John's t-shirt off to a great graduate program in another part of the country and advertise the superb liberal arts education you got. We will do what we can to make sure that your graduate education is as successful as possible, even if it's not taking place in Collegeville.
In an administrative presidential role, if you could speak a little bit to the coordinate relationship and what you see in the future on both challenges and opportunities.
Sure. Well, so of the most interesting aspects of the past year, the coordinate relationship would probably be at the top of that list. When I first got the call from the search consultants, you'll talk to them as you get involved in these sorts of job searches, and the Jackie Dowd, who was the search consultant, my first conversation, she said, one thing you should know is that, or one question you should ask yourself is, are you prepared to be president of an institution where you're really not in charge because of this coordinate relationship with St. Ben's? And I blithely said, oh, I went to St. John's. I know all about the relationship with St. Ben's. Well, can you spell hubris? But it's mostly been interesting as opposed to a source of frustration or challenging. I mean, Mary Ann Benninger has been as good a partner as one could possibly hope for. She's been generous, helpful, thoughtful, very supportive. She's helped me discover where some of the bodies are buried. That has been a very important part of my experience over the past 9 months. And I have a lot to learn from Ann. And she's been in this job for 9 years. She's got great experience on the national stage. So that's been very, very helpful. And I do think there are challenges, of course. I mean, every time you make a budget decision, you have to ask, okay, now is this a decision where it's a St. John's budget alone? So if Father Doug wants to do something in student development, okay, he's good to go. If Rita wants to do something in academic affairs, we have to ask, okay, well, how does that affect our colleagues at St. Ben's? But, you just get used to thinking in that way, and, all of us in this room have adapted to that to some extent. In small ways, you ask yourself, okay, is this meeting in St. Joe or is this meeting in Collegeville? Where do I have to be? But I think that the strengths of that relationship and the unique experience that it gives our students far outweighs the costs. I think that we definitely have challenges going forward. The disparity between men and women provides a challenge. The women have made their class and admissions more easily than the men have in recent years. I'd love for that to not be true. I'd love for us both to make our class without question every year. But, and I also think that the strength of being able to examine men's issues and engage men at St. John's and have women's issues, which are slightly different in many ways, at St. Ben's, that's very valuable. I think the co-ed institutions don't have that strength. They try to do student programming that does things for both men and women. I think that can be complicated. But I think that, maybe this is behind the question or maybe not, but let me be a politician and answer the question that I wanted you to ask, which is, what is the future of these relationships, of this relationship going forward? Alums have asked this very explicitly, and there are, three different options, I suppose. One is that we could pull a St. Thomas and we could become co-ed at St. John's. That's not even on the table. We've committed to the joint nature of this relationship a long time ago. We built buildings on campuses knowing that chemistry students are going to be going to St. Ben's, and whatever the other science students are going to be at St. John's. That's the way it's going to work. So there's no question that never say never, right? But don't take this out of context. So going co-ed is not in the medium-term or long-term vision that I or anyone else has for this institution. So I don't think that's even a possibility. Second possibility would be to become a single institution, to combine, to become, the Benedictine institutions of central Minnesota or some boring name like that. I don't think that that's in the short run or medium run conversation either. I think that the two institutions have distinctive histories, distinctive alumni bodies, and so I don't think that there's any desire to become one institution. I think we value our independence even as we value our coordinate relationship. So the third option is to do what we do better, to find other ways to coordinate the relationship, to combine certain kinds of activities, and this is where some economies might come in. You know, we could save some money by having one president, I suppose. That one hasn't crossed my mind all that often. But we do need to think about how to find both economies that take advantage of the two institutions. You know, we've done a lot of that already, but I think there's more we can do in that regard. And I think the second thing we need to think about, even more importantly, is how to make the coordinate relationship work better for our students. And I think one of the interesting things that's been a little bit different from for current students and when I was a student, I was in that era where the students viewed their relationship as more or less kind of a single academic experience, but there were still some differences. There were some differences in requirements for students, and now that's all gone away. So I think students view their experience as being a St. Ben, St. John's experience, and I think alums speak to that when they tell us about their experience. And so I think to find ways to make that work even better for our students academically, it would be an important thing to do. But I think that in going forward, strengthening the coordinate relationship while maintaining two separate institutions is the direction that we're going to go. I mean, I don't think I think that makes sense for us to not lose the strengths, but to find ways to take fuller advantage of the coordinate relationship to the degree that we can. Sorry, that turned into a little lecture. Not had that tendency sometimes. Anything else? Other questions, concerns, things you're wondering about? Well, I was going to let class go early, but go ahead.
Sorry. Just your thoughts on, you know, this, there have been issues with the students and their feelings and
Really?
looking ahead to next year, and just some perspective you might have on your confidence with how things are settling down and impact that these issues may or may not have on the incoming class, et cetera.
Sure. That's a great question. I mean, some of you have been more intimately involved in these issues than I have, but as you probably know, that students have been upset and frustrated about a few things this spring. I mean, starting with the 13 Pines and the Sammy Adams situation. There have been issues and challenges with housing and our 4-year residency requirement and how that's worked this spring. There's frustration with St. Joe and the ordinances that were put in place at St. Joe. Students are unhappy about locks on the dorms. We're now going to 24-hour locks on the St. John's dorms. You know, I think each one of these things individually would not have been a big deal. And the housing is probably the one that students are the most concerned about. But, you know, if these other things had not happened at the same time, I think we wouldn't have had this sort of sense that students are unhappy and frustrated about what's going on campus. And some have speculated, and I can certainly share the view that the weather has not helped matters. I mean, it's been a hard winter, and it's not over yet, sadly. But having said that, I think that in my conversations with students and parents about these issues, first, there's open communication. I think students feel quite comfortable, maybe sometimes too comfortable, to let you know if they're unhappy about something. And their parents also are happy to share their views on things. But on net, that's a good thing. I mean, we should know what students and parents and alums are thinking about things, and they should know that we are always going to answer their questions. Secondly, I would say that for every single one of these issues, individually, the rationale behind it was thoughtful and carefully made. And the decision was carefully made. I think that when explained to students, even if they don't disagree, I went to the Student Senate a week or so ago and talked about some of these issues. And at the end of the evening, it was clear that the students didn't always agree with the outcome of the decisions that we made, but I think they appreciated the fact that they were thoughtfully made. It's not a desire to keep the students from having a good time, all decisions are made, I think, with students' best interests at heart, even if the student's definition of their best interest and our definition might be a little bit different. So the specific question is, how might it affect things in the short run? There's been some talk about whether this would affect yield and admissions and that sort of thing going forward. Cal's here somewhere. He can give you more details, but he left the building. I'm glad you got that letter I sent you this morning. No, the reality is we're in pretty good shape. I mean, we need to wait till May 1 when students sign on the dotted line. In fact, we probably need to wait till the 10th day in the fall to see who really is still standing. But, we've had the greatest number of applications we've ever had. We have the greatest number of admissions from those applications we've ever had. We have the greatest number of deposits at this point in the year that we've ever had. So all those things, we couldn't ask for any of those numbers to be better than they are currently, based on historical numbers. Now, as Cal will remind us, a year ago at this time, we felt quite good about these numbers as well. Things were looking good as well, and then we didn't get quite the yield we liked, and we had a little bit of melt from May to into the summer. So we need to make sure that we, don't start counting our chickens too early, but I think we're in okay shape, and I think that the issues that were making students frustrated and unhappy, they haven't been completely resolved, but they've become less pressing over the last couple weeks. I think as students have understood the decisions and some of the housing things have gotten sorted out a little bit better. So I think we're in okay shape. But the most important thing is I think that what it says about the community and the way that we interact with each other is very important. I think students feel heard, even if they don't always feel agreed with, and I think that's very important. And I also would thank those of you that have had to deal with these things one-on-one. I mean, they tend to show up in my email box or I get phone calls, but it's only after a number of you have dealt with some very frustrated and unhappy people, and a lot of those never make it to my office, so I thank you for that, and I also acknowledge that, I'm sure it's not the funnest part of your job to deal with unhappy students or parents, but, it's the business we're in, sadly. But again, that's, 1% of the student body. It's the 99% we need to also keep our eye on. Anything else? We're nearing the end. I know some of you have other things you might want to be doing, but I can, one last question. I'm happy to stay around a little bit if you want to have individual questions as well. Well, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for this last year. It's been incredible.